Hey guys, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is Ankush here from Alif Consulting. Welcome back in our partner enablement video series. In today's video, we're going to understand how we can organize Azure resources in a Azure subscriptions or in a multi-tenants. Now in this video, we're going to have the basic understanding. We're going to have how the management level and hierarchy looks like, how the Azure resource hierarchy looks like, and what are the options we have to segregate our resources or do the separation of our resources. And then we're going to see what are the resource limitations or the tags which we need to apply for the deployments. Now let's quickly jump to the introduction. So Azure provide you the many options to organize your resources, right? Either you can have it in a multi-tenant, or either you can have it in a multiple subscriptions, or either you can have it into the multiple resources within the subscriptions as well, right? In this video, we will be going to review two core elements of organizing the resources. Either it can be a tenant isolations, or either it can be a resource isolation or subscription isolations, right? We'll also going to understand how to work with the Azure resource limitation quotas and how to scale your solution beyond these limits. Well, this is how your management level and hierarchy looks like. In a subscription, when you have a multiple subscriptions, you have your management groups, and the management group help you to define the policies, can help you to define the or manage the access, and can help you to define the compliances for your multiple subscriptions as well, right? With the management group, it automatically inherited all the compliances, the policies and the condition which you have applied on the management group, right? So let's take an example. You have a one management group and you have a 5 subscription running it under that management group, right? But you find out and you apply the policies on the management group, that will be automatically get inherited to all the subscription until unless you have created the exclusion for a specific resource or the specific subscription. Then you have a subscriptions. So subscriptions are the logically isolated user account that with the resource they create. Each subscription have a limit or quota on the amount of resources it can be created and used. Organizations can use the subscriptions to manage the cost and resource created by user teams and the projects. So all the resources or I can say is all the subscription have their own limits. They have a soft limit and their hard limit. Soft limit can be increased, but hard limit cannot be increased. If you cross your hard limits, you need to go with the or you need to provision a new subscription to deploy your services, right? And it also allows you to do the cost management, allow you to tagging the resources, doing the costing and stuff like that. And then you have a resource group, which is a logical container where you can deploy or manage your resource Azure resources like web apps, database, and the storage account. And then you have a resources like the VM, SQL databases, automation account, storage account, VNet, that actually are the resources or the services which you deploy to host your applications. Right? This is how your management level and hierarchy looks like. A tenant can have a multiple management group also, or that multiple management group can have a multiple subscription within a one tenant also. Another thing is these management group are basically entitled to the tenants. So if you have a multiple tenants, you might be having a separate management group in the separate tenant, and you may need to create a separate policies or separate compliances or separate access policies for that also, because they are belongs to the different tenants or different Azure Active Directory. This is how your resource hierarchy looks like. So in a subscription, you have a Azure Resource Manager, which can be done through the PowerShell or CLI, and then you have a Azure Resource Provider, which allows you or help you to create the resources whenever a deployment has been submitted, and they are basically connected with the Azure Active Directory. They are automatically get trusted with the Azure Active Directory. And for the Azure Resource Management and Azure Provider, you can use Azure Portal, CLI, and PowerShells to manage or deploy the resources. And then under that, you can have your management group, Azure subscription resource group, resources. That's where you can define your limitations, cost management, resource policies, and stuff like that inside a Azure subscription. Now let's talk about how you can do the isolation, right? We are going to talk about 4 types of isolations with this video, which you can use with your customer custom with you can which you basically you can have a discussion with your customers, and you can design the solution accordingly as well. So first is isolation within a shared resources. So let's say you have a one subscription, right? And then you can have your shared resources like application, database, storage account deployed uh, inside a subscription, and you can leverage them and you can use all of them to deploy your application, right? With this one, what is going to be happen, your all of the workload will be going to run on the single instance, and and you can basically, and when you run a single instance of resources, you need to consider any limitation, subscription limitations, quota that might to be reached as you scale. So when you are running a shared services, every service have their own limitations, so you need to consider that as well, because at the time, at the some time later on in the future, you might be reaching that specific limit, which you may need to you need to think about it, right? So that's where a problem with the shared resources. Although if you are using or if you are deploying a very simple application or very small application which not going to be scale that much of resources, you can simply deploy and run the shared application. Another one is separate resources in a groups, right? So that's something you can do. So in our last slide, what we have seen, our all the resources like web app, storage account, database basis has been in the shared resource group or in a one resource group and using the uh, shared resource. But with the separate resources in a separate resource group can help you to separate, do the separation of your applications. Maybe you're running a multiple applications that can be run on one application, one web app or two web app or three web app. In the backend, what you can do, you can have your multiple databases according to the application, right? So that something is there, and then you can have your logical segregations using the Azure resource group, and can help you to separate the resources, and can basically and will help you to not bother you whenever you reach to that specific limit of a resource group or something like that, right? And it's a good practice to use a separate resources group of this resources you shared between the multi-tenant and the resources that you deploy for the individual tenant. And the life cycle management will be going to be pretty much easy when you are having a multi resources resource group deployment, or if you have a separate resources in a separate in a resource group deployment. Another one is separate resource group in a subscription. So that's also one of the best solution I can say, and which I probably use whenever I design the solutions. In our last two slide, what we have seen in first slide, our all the services has been shared in one resource group, and they are using the simply the application, databases and storage in a shared, right? In our first slide. In the second slide, where we talked about separate resources in a resource group, where our application and database applications and storage account will be was on the shared model, but our databases are basically created in the tenant wise. In this group, in this type of deployment, which is called as a separate resource group in a subscription, can help you to do a segregation in between the application, right? So in this specific deployment type, what is going to be happen, all of our applications, web apps, databases and storage account would be going to in the separate resource group and will be going to remain separate for all the applications. Like if I'm having a 5 application or 6 application, I'm going to have a 6 web apps, 6 databases and 6 storage accounts, and they will be get segregated to each other based on the resource groups, right? And it's help you to basically do a separation and help you to control your policies and help you to maintain the compliance and security as well. And it can also help you to configure the policies and can help you to do the access control rules as well for your application and the resources. Third, separate subscription within a one tenant, which is quite not a best practices, because you might be end up having the multiple subscription, and you may reach out to the specific limit where you cannot have a more than that subscription. So that's something is a problem, but this is one of the, I can say, is a good practice when you want to manage your billing accounts and the billing types that you can do. And with having the separate subscription, can you will be giving you the logical separation. It will sorry, not a logical, it's going to a physical separation of your application, because your application is running in a multiple subscription. So one subscription is going to can have a separate set of policies and control. Another subscription can have a separate access and controls, and can apply can apply on top of the application. So that's where you can do and manage your tenancy, having the multiple subscriptions running into the one tenant, right? Make you aware the number of subscription that you create. The maximum number of subscription might differ, depends on your commercial relationship with the Microsoft or the Microsoft partner, such as if you have an enterprise agreement. Again, here we are talking about you might be having a logical limitations, or I can say the hard limitations. You might be reach out to that and end up with that if you're creating a multiple subscriptions for your multiple applications, right? Or multiple tenancy. You might be what you can do, you can have your subscription created with the department, and all the department can have their resources running in that one specific subscription, and put their control and stuff like that, and the policies on top of that. That's also a good practice. But with this one, you might be end up to having a multiple subscription, or managing a multiple subscription may end up with the extra overhead of managing the subscription. Another one is uh, having the separate tenant and separate subscription, which is quite good, can be help you to do that as well, and can use to manage your applications, and then spread across the multiple tenants. But you may end up of making the multiple tenants, and with that one you might need to be manage the multiple active directories, multiple conditional policies, multiple Azure policies, and multiple users, because at the end of the day you are end up with the multiple tenants, right? With the last one where we are having a separate subscriptions in last slide, you have a one active directory tenant, right? With the one active directory tenant with the one user credentials, user can log in with any subscription based on they have the access. But here you might be end up with creating the multiple tenants, and in then multiple tenants you might be end up with creating the multiple resource group also, and then you do have a lighthouse which you can use and integrate to access the subscriptions as well. So these are the 5 types of resource group deployment or resource group separations you can do inside the Azure, and that's something basically is decision need to be taken by you as a provider, or by us as a provider. So we need to think about what kind of topology or what kind of deployment method we can use for the customer requirement, or how much overhead admin overhead customer can bear that, and accordingly we can define the solution. So best is to have have a multiple subscription for prod, UAT, and dev, and then have their all of the resources deployed inside that. So it's again depend on how customer want to move forward, how customer is going to choose this deployment methods, or I can say the separation of the subscriptions or the resources, right? Resource limit and tax. So Azure have limitations. Definitely there is a quota and limitations you need to consider when you're planning your solutions. Uh, that's something you need to think about it whenever you are refining a strategy, or I can say is the deployments, or separation of Azure resources. Another thing is the tag. uh, Azure tags can be help you to very important, can help you to monitor the costing, and can monitor the resources for which department they belongs to, or which cost center they belongs to. So there are the anti-patterns to avoid not planning for scale. So these are you need to understand is you need to always think about how you can scale it, or what kind of scaling you might be having in future. No planning to bin pack. This is again you need to think about plan to scale your Azure resources across the multiple resources, multiple resource group, and the subscription over the time. Avoid making assumption in your application code like they being a single resource when you might be need to be scaling a multiple resources in the future. So don't do the assumption, always do the assessment and accordingly plan it. Scaling many individual resources, this is one of the thing. And there is the deployment stem pattern, for which we are going to have a specific video. So you need to think about it, you need to accordingly deploy your individual resources accordingly. Deploying isolation resources for each tenant when not required, this is one of the the anti-pattern which you need to avoid. It's not like you might be having multiple resources for different application. They can be having a one separate subscription or maybe on one separate resource group, but they don't need to be on the different tenants. That's something you also need to avoid using the separate edit tenants, which can help you to end up with having a multiple overhead and do the complexity of the environment or the management over architecting when you don't need to scale. So this is also one of the pattern to be avoided. It's simply like when you don't need scaling, right? You don't need any kind of scaling. It's going to be a static website. Then you don't need to be scale the application accordingly. You don't need to think about it like you are doing it a scaling, but you don't need that because that ultimately is a over architecting and can lead you the situation where you might be having a problem and reach to a certain beyond limit is, and you may need to be rethinking about or redeploying your applications, right? So that's all. So again, these are the same. I think. Yep. So these are the same. So there is a multiple slide for that. So these are the anti patterns which you need to avoid, and this can help you to select the better separation of your resources or resources according to the topology which we have discussed in our last few slides. Well, let's move to the demo. So in the demo, I might not be able to show you multiple things like having the multiple subscriptions and having it in the multiple tenants, but I will be quickly going to show you how you can have your separations within a one subscription and having a multiple resource groups. So let's move to the demo. So I am already logged in with my Azure subscription. So in my Azure subscription, if you go on a resource group, you will be going to see I have a multiple resource group deployed, right? Now, what is the purpose of having this multiple resource group? So if you go with the first one where I have Alif demo resource group, I have all the AKS component deployed, right? And rest of the components has been deployed in the other, which is MC underscore Alif demo dash Alif demo AKS underscore is to us, and you will be seeing like there is I have a multiple or rest of the resources has been deployed for this AKS. Now if I want to have a more resources created, right, what I can do, let's say I want to have a database created, right, I can have a one more resource group created like a database, right, and then I can select the resource group, I can define the tag, and then I can deploy my database here, right. Let's say I want to deploy the database, right, let's say I want to use the Azure database. I can go ahead and deploy that database here. So what kind of database I want to do? I'm using a single server, and from here I can create my databases inside the resource group. So let's take an example. I want to do in a ES2 S2 Alif demos DB server. I need to define the username, right? If you want to have some additional setting, that's it. We don't want to do that. And click on create. Oops. Oh, apologies for that. I may need to fill uh, everything again. And I need to define the username and password. That's it. And review and create. So it's going to be click on create, and as soon as you're done, it will be going to deploy this one, and your resources will be get deployed in the separate resource group, right? So that's how you can do a separation, right? You can have your all the resources deployed in a one resource group for the specific application and then use the shared module, and the same way You can have your application deployed in the separate resource group to segregate them according to their requirement, or have them a separation for their business department or the end users, right? So that's how you can have your multiple types of deployment inside the Azure subscription. Well, that's it in a demo. I hope you like this demo. Well, if you like this video, please click on like and subscribe for more upcoming videos, and feel free to reach us if you need any help. Thank you.